Tea Time with Tawnee. Today my selected tea of the day is a cinnamon tea, midnight cinnamon, and oh my gosh, the smell of it is just incredible. It doesn't really have caffeine, but it's so good for digestion, and I never feel like it makes me tired or anything such as that. So cheers and welcome to Tea Time with Tawnee. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you were able to tune in last week, you would have noticed I was in wilderness, and so I wanted to extend that today by just be in nature and share a little bit with you my experience that I had camping in a tent for about 10 days. So if any of you have camped, you know what it's like. If you haven't, then I wanted to share a little bit with you, not just only what it's like, but all of the incredible parts of nature and wildlife that we were able to spot while we were on this adventure. We started when we left and we headed to Utah. We stayed there for one night in Sandy, Utah, at a beautiful campsite. We ended up getting very lucky as they only have 24 sites at this campground, and apparently they had been turning down people all day long, but for us, we just got there in time where a family had canceled actually, or didn't need the third campsite. They only needed two, so it all of a sudden opened up for us, and the first animal we spot right when we arrived to our campsite was a moose. And the moose was just very casually eating some food. As you can see, it was a quite incredible experience to get to see this on the first day of our adventure. We ended up having a great night, set up the hammock, and Booker was wandering around and smelling all of the new smells, just barely hiking maybe 5 minutes up the hill. There was some ice, so that was a really neat experience. In the summertime, you get a much cooler atmosphere, and the weather is cooler, obviously, the more you travel, depending on what direction you go in. And then after Utah, we headed straight to Montana the next day and started out in Missoula. And Missoula is a wonderful town and state if you have never been there. An incredible place to go right now, as it's such clean air. And again, so much wildlife we saw. When we arrived in Missoula, we have a friend who lives there. And the first day we arrived, if I'm not mistaken, we went straight on a hike and tubing right after that. And the hike was really incredible. We saw a lot of waterfalls and streams, and Booker just loves to drink water out of moving streams, which is probably one of his favorite things to do on hikes. And then the weather is so much cooler that it helps him not to get overheated. So that's a really nice aspect that you have in terms of the outdoors and traveling away from the dry area to where you're around a lot more water and surrounded by more streams and more waterfalls. And so that was a lot of fun. He didn't go tubing with us, however. He stayed behind after a few miles of a hike. And then the following day, we actually very excitingly headed to the Glacier National Park and also the Glacier National Forest, where we ended up camping. And rewind quickly, in Missoula, we were just camping in the backyard of our friend's place. So I was still in a tent. Of course, there was a shower accessible to me, but we were still camping. We were definitely using a jet boiler to heat up water, and I would go inside and cook some breakfast in the morning. But now that we arrive at Glacier National Forest and start our camping adventure there, that was about a 5-night sleeping camping trip. And every day we ended up somewhere different. The first day when we arrived, we drove all the way up Glacier National Park, and it's, if I'm not mistaken, about a 44-mile drive, and you just see beautiful waterfalls, incredible wildlife, lots of greenery, lots of amazing looking rocks, and just unexpected views. So we kind of covered all that the first day, headed back to our campsite by the time it was dark, and set up our camp. We had to find the campsite since everything's going on with this pandemic. A lot of sites were closed, so you sort of have to get creative and be pretty prepared for that, which we ended up in front of. It was an actual campsite because it had a fire pit, which was really great, but it was in front of a big gate that essentially they opened, and one day had let us know we had to move our stuff to the side. But as smart campers such as ourselves, we made sure to pack up all the tents but one every day, put all of the food away every night, of course, because you want to prevent bears and other wildlife from getting into your stuff or smelling out where you're sleeping. And so that was a really exciting and kind of scary aspect every day. We'd wake up in the morning and there would be a deer right in the bushes, just kind of eating some greenery, and it was right next to where we were camping. Thankfully, during our camping experience in the evening, there were no bears. However, on one of our hikes, there was a bear. It was a black bear. But before I get to that, I wanted to just share a little bit with you about all the different adventures we went on. So in Glacier National Park, we were able to rent canoes one day and kayaks, and I had Booker in the canoe with me, just chilling, enjoying his time. And I believe the day before that, we hiked Logan Pass, and that is 6,500 or so elevation, so it's not a horribly high elevation. However, we were hiking in the snow at times, and there was some incredible wildlife. Sometimes it was difficult to take pictures, of course, because I was moving the whole time, and Booker was just a little go-getter. And at one point, I was literally skiing in my shoes down a hill with Booker as the sled. A few times people had said that I was cheating because he was helping me, which if you've ever tried to hike with an 80-pound dog in the ice, you're definitely not cheating, and it's extremely more challenging. I would say much more challenging than it would be if you were just by yourself, if you were with some camping poles or hiking poles or something. And then the canoes were the next day, and that was lovely. Of course, we made some sandwiches and had some ciders, and might I say, in Montana there are some incredibly tasty seltzers that are also alcohol. They have really gotten it right on point with the light alcohol beverages, where they've even tried to add hops to some of their beverages to avoid adding the yeast. And I might say I tried quite a few varieties of ciders and seltzers, and there were some really good ones in there. After the Logan Pass, again, like I said, was the canoes. The biggest hike we went on that I wanted to share with you was Lake Okatomo, Lake Okatomo, Lake Okatama, Lake Okatomo. You get the drift. Anywho, it was the Rose Trail, and one way on that hike was about 5.5 miles, and the goal was to get to this lake. Well, the whole way up, we were actually hiking. There were streams, and you'd hear water, but the exciting part is about 40 yards away from us, maybe half a mile, quarter mile into the hike, there was a black bear. And this black bear was probably an adolescent, which I'm so sad I didn't get a picture of, but when you're in the moment, it's a little scary and exciting and a little bit of a rush. The bear did not see us the first time. We waited a little bit, the bear was gone, so we went a little bit more. We saw the bear again. He seemed to be following the same trail we were following. Didn't see us again. And by the third time, after we stopped and went again, the bear saw us and he ran. And so we were hoping and thinking now time of year is the time you could see a bear, because they're not really feeding on. Now is the time to see a bear this time of year, because they're not as hungry and they have plenty to eat, rather than when they're hibernating. So that was a magical experience in itself. And then I believe that hike was crazy intense. We got to the top, we took a little break, dipped our feet in the water. My boyfriend, however, and one of his friends jumped into the water, and it was very cold. I could probably only withstand it on my feet for about 60 seconds. But the invigorating feeling you got, and it was really good for Booker because he got to constantly stand in streams and drink running water, and very much enjoyed his break and his bone, which he was rewarded at the top. And once we hit the top, it's actually also a campsite. This is a kind I believe is called back road camping or something, where you have to actually get a permit, but you backpack up to the 5.5 mile lake, and then you can fish and cook your dinner right then and there. There were some trout that we saw in the water as well, so that was pretty awesome. There were a couple days that some fishing was attempted, and we tried a couple of different lakes. Not much luck. The one trout we got was too small, but again, on the hike we did see trout. And finishing that hike, oh my gosh, we were so exhausted by that time, but on the way down we ended up seeing a bighorn sheep. And I don't know if I mentioned the Logan Pass hike. We saw this white goat, mountain goat, that was so close to Booker, and I have some incredible footage of them just being so close to one another, and the goat just doing his thing, not even paying any attention to any of the tourists. Of course, there's some different waterfalls we went and saw. We soaked our head in a waterfall as we drove by it. I think one of the really neat parts of this experience is all of this was frozen water at one point from the snow, and then in the summertime it just melts, and it's called melted glacier ice. And you could throw snowballs when you're reaching a certain mountain, and then another mountain that's the same elevation, because of depending on where the sun is, that same elevation from another area, there's absolutely no snow. And that's when we did the Rose Trail hike. So some of the awesome food that we ate was really incredible too. We would actually use sticks that my boyfriend shaved with a machete to the tip, and we can heat them up on the fire. Every night we had a beautiful fire under the stars, and we would heat our food up on sticks. There were some really awesome meals that we had, including steak and chicken, potatoes and vegetables, with really delicious, I would say, kind of like a hot dog on a stick, but it was a really fancy gluten, yeast-free bread with hot dogs in the middle. And so it just never ended. We had delicious food cooked in a completely different way, and every night we got back to our campsite after dark. The idea was always to try to get back at maybe 7 and enjoy time in the hammock, but we were always on such an adventure that by the time we would get back to our campsite, it was usually 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and we would find ourselves eating dinner at midnight. But it was so peaceful under the stars, it just kind of stops. The universe is just all there for you to look up at and to explore, and it's just a really incredible experience. So I want to encourage you again, as I did a little bit in the last video, but some of these images that you're seeing, I mean, this is just us on the move, capturing any of the images I could capture and wanting to share these experiences with you in hopes that it will encourage you to step outside and go on an adventure yourself. And I would really love if you could comment below some of the different places you've been that you think should be shared or someone should have seen. And if you have any links to any incredible places which you either have visited or you want to visit, please do let me know in the comments below. I wanted to thank you for